welcome to the PrePost Film Review. I'm Matt Stevenson.
And I'm Jon Asquith. It's been a little while since we posted an episode.
It has. Welcome back, John.
Yeah, thank you. And to you as well.
Yeah, thank you.
And if anyone's listening, we're very happy to be back in your ears, tickling those little ear hairs.
Tickling those eardrums.
Yep. It's been about 6 months since we last posted something.
Been a while.
And, there's no real main reason for that. It's just a bunch of, work, life, laziness, all that good stuff. But we're back today, and this is sort of like a 2-for-1 episode. We've both seen the newest Todd Phillips, Joaquin Phoenix film, Joker. And we're guessing most of our listeners have probably seen that by now as well. So we haven't chatted about this in person, but we were very keen to see what each other thinks. So we thought we'd finally get back in the booth. And by booth, we mean in front of our computers with shitty microphones. And talk about Joker. And then maybe that'll lead into just like a general filmy catch-up.
Yeah, it's been a while, so
what we've
be good to catch up
exactly.
with what we've been watching and catch you guys up with the films we've been seeing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and just have more of a general chat and sort of easing back into the pod. So, that's the plan for today. Obviously, we don't have a pre for Joker, but maybe, it's worth discussing what our expectations were, if you can remember, before seeing, because this film was announced quite a while ago, I seem to recall, and there was instantly kind of like WTF when it was announced. What the hell is this thing going to be? Can you remember how you felt about it?
That is a very good question. I think very, very, very early on, I feel like it was quiet optimism, I think, or maybe not optimism, but at least surprise. Like, it felt unique and different, and I was intrigued. Maybe even like unsure if it would ever, eventuate into anything. And I believe sort of like back then Scorsese was involved, and it was like there were big names that made it sound a bit more interesting. But certainly as we got closer and closer to the actual release of the film, I certainly soured on the idea of the film. I feel like I'm definitely probably more negative. I was definitely more negative than you going in. And that's not to say that I didn't like the idea of an original take on the superhero genre. It was more that, again, we talk about this fucking endlessly on the pod, so it's probably boring to all of our listeners, but just in the sense of superhero fatigue, I mean that I'm at like peak superhero fatigue at the moment, it just seems endless. And I know probably that almost seems like I should be looking forward to this because it's almost like the antithesis of something like Marvel, but to me it was kind of worrying in a sense that like not only was superhero cinema saturating anything that was bigger than like, a $30 million budget, but now we couldn't even have like a mid-range adult orientated like drama without it also being somehow tangentially a superhero film, which I found quite troubling. And I distinctly remember being quite I don't know, kind of I wasn't convinced that someone like Todd Phillips, and that's not to say Todd Phillips is a bad filmmaker, but just his track record of, sort of only making the Hangover films and a couple of kind of like nasty comedy films could pull off something that was pitching itself as this sort of like edgy, more mature, more thoughtful take on the superhero genre. So, I am very aware that I was quite negative on this film going in, I should say. Yeah, that's not to say that in a sense that I was hoping that would set me up for being in a position where I could be quite easily impressed. I'm going in with the bar low, but my expectations were not high, and I feel like the closer we got and the more hype the film got, sort of like winning the top prize at Venice. Actually, I mean, the cynical side of me sort of like pushed back against that, but then there's also part of me that, that makes it very fucking interesting. Like, by the time this film was actually released, I was almost like so excited to see it, not because I wanted to see the film itself, but because I didn't understand like what this thing was. Like the acclaim it seemed to be getting on one hand, and the talent behind it on the other hand didn't seem to match. I mean, I liked Joaquin Phoenix. I love everything he's done. I don't know. It was just such a weird beast. But if I'm brutally honest, and I think we sort of had these discussions off mic, I was scared of what it meant for the film industry, and I was not looking forward to it deep down, even if I was very curious as to what it could be. What about you? I don't recall. I feel like you're a bit more positive than me, but yeah. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, well, like everyone, when it was first announced, it took me a while to just compute like what is this thing going to be, because as you say, originally Scorsese was attached to it as a producer, and that was almost the headline to begin with. It was like Scorsese producing Joker movie, and it was like so confusing.
Yeah, and like that alone is enough for I feel like people like film nerds like us to like stand at attention, right? Like,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. So that it piqued my interest. I wasn't cynical about it. I immediately thought, okay, whatever this thing is, it must have something deeper, or I don't know, a different take, or it must have something that has attracted Scorsese to it, because he just wouldn't attach himself to something like this otherwise normally. And then I think probably the next announcement was Joaquin Phoenix is in it, and it's being directed by Todd Phillips, which was just, again, like, what the fuck is this?
It's like column A amazing, column B troubling.
Yeah. One of the greatest actors, of the current sort of generation, Hollywood generation. And Todd Phillips, again, like, I haven't even seen the Hangover movies. I've seen bits of them, and I don't like what I've seen. And I think I've seen maybe some of his earlier, like, raunchy...
He did, like, a road trip, yeah.
I really liked that when I was, like, a teenager.
But he's not, like, Scorsese-level filmmaking talent.
It just didn't make sense, It wasn't even, like, a judgment, necessarily. It was just, like, how is this
out of his wheelhouse, totally.
Yeah.
Which in a way is like exciting, right? Like it's cool to see it
is.
But unproven.
Exactly. Yeah. Unproven, yeah. And so, leaving Todd Phillips to the side of that, I still thought, well, if Joaquin is into it and Scorsese is into it, then there's something.
That's all you need.
It's going to be interesting. Yeah. And so that kind of planted a seed in me for the rest of leading up to the production and the release, that I just had a feeling that it wasn't going to be utter shit, let's say that, and that it would be interesting in some way, and that excited me, because I think Joaquin very rarely, I mean, I can't even think off the top of my head, makes bad choices. Maybe not every film he's in is amazing, but it's always interesting, and he is always interesting in his performances. As it got closer to release, there was a sort of muddying whether Scorsese was actually involved, and you started hearing that the film really relies heavily on Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, and this sort of the Scorsese feel, I guess, as well of the 70s. And that was interesting, but then it was also like, oh, he's not really that involved. And you and me were discussing just recently, Matt, having seen the film, is he a producer or not? But it turns out he's not, right? He was attached, but he was still kind of hands off and like.
Yeah,
do you know the
no, I mean,
process?
no more than that article I sent you, John, a week or so ago, or whenever it was. Like, because I was very confused as well. I was sort of under the impression that he was until I saw the film, and then I was reading reviews that were saying that he should have been a producer given the influences, and I got very confused and did a bit of research. And from what I understand, is that sort of like he was involved as a producer in no creative sense. It was more of a logistical sense in that they needed someone that was New York based to shoot some of the New York stuff, and he usually only lends his name to stuff that would sort of he would feel creatively involved in. It's rare that he would produce sort of hands off, and I feel like from the article I read, I don't know how true this is, the closer it got to production, I feel like the more hands off he was, and it got to a point where he was not involved at all, and he just stepped aside. And at the end of the day, he does not have a official producer credit as far as I'm aware. But it is muddled. Like, he was involved at some point. Yeah, it's
yes.
I don't think he was ever creatively involved, from my understanding. But yeah,
no, yeah, that seems clear now. But yeah, it's just interesting because the film is so closely tied to his early works, and then having him just by name involved early, it kind of all mishmashes up, and so that's a bit confusing. Anyway, all this spiel is saying that I was more hopeful and curious and interested than probably you were, but kind of for similar reasons. But the other side of the coin, like what is this? Can this be good? But in a more hopeful way. So yeah, I was keen, and then all the pre-buzz was again just interesting and real, made me so curious that it could receive such high praise at Venice. And then of course there's the preview screenings, and there's sort of this backlash that appeared as well. Like, you had like complete either one or the other viewpoint. It's really interesting, and I think anyway, I got more to say about that, but let's jump into what we thought, Matt, and maybe we'll just jump straight into spoilers. I'm assuming people have seen the film. If you're listening to this and you haven't seen it, don't listen to this, because there is a lot to talk about, and there are heavy kind of spoilery things to chat about. So yeah, stop listening if you haven't seen it. But let's jump straight in. What were your thoughts then after all this lead up? Finally seeing the film for yourself, Matt. What were your general thoughts on?
I am disappointed to say that, like, I wanted a strong reaction to this film. I wanted to either come out loving it or despising it. Mm-hmm. Like we just talked about, the critical response seemed to be sort of splitting.
Yep.
But I feel like I came out sort of bang in the middle. But to be honest, the further I get away from it and the more that I read about it, I'm souring on it a lot. So my view is definitely tipping negative. But the actual experience of watching it, I feel like it wasn't as provocative as I thought it was going to be. Visually, I should say I saw it in a projected off a 70mm print, which I think is appropriate. Like, it looked beautiful. Like I said in the intro, my superhero fatigue, and everyone I'm sure is well aware of how much I shit on Marvel. I'm sure we'll get emails about this, but there is something to respect about a studio film that takes some known property and goes on a completely tangential direction, and it's not bombastic. The violence is not fun action scenes. It is a dark, brooding, almost drama more than it is anything else, which that there is hands down something that you have to respect about that there is something to admire. Having said that, I think overall it felt very shallow to me. Hearing just off mic, we were talking a little bit about J.J. Abrams and the sort of shallow reproductions of certain films. To me, this feels like a shallow reproduction of Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. And I know Todd Phillips is very open about those two films being overt references, but for me, they were so overt to the point of being distracting. Like, it was almost like scenes were almost shot for shot remakes. And maybe it was more apparent for me because I'd recently watched Taxi Driver at a BFI like re-screening, and I literally just watched King of Comedy last night to compare it because I hadn't seen it for a few years. And there is, with spoilers, but I don't know how recently you've seen King of Comedy, but the final shot of Joker in the insane asylum with him walking down the hallway is a shot from King of Comedy. Like, it is just shot for shot, like taken from, like, it just felt like it was borrowing from films that were so much more nuanced and interested in exploring complicated characters, whereas this film was. It does have ideas. I don't want to take that away from it, but the ideas to me felt scattershot, and they never delved into any of them. Like, it was like, let's touch mental illness, let's touch class, society, equality. I don't know. Like, it was just like it felt to me like let's touch on a whole bunch of socio-economic factors that may result in this kind of like isolated violent male, but never explored them in any way that felt necessary or interesting or unique. And the more I think about it, the further I get away from it, the more kind of like hollow, and then following from that hollowness, potentially dangerous this film is. And I didn't think I would think that going in, and even when I watched it, like, it is curdling a little bit in my mind. And I will just say, before I ask you what your thoughts were on it, like, again, as I stressed at the beginning, I do think there's a merit to like, it's not like films cannot explore this territory. I mean, like, Taxi Driver is a perfect example of something that, like, delves into the darkness of this male character who is pushed to a place of violence. But I think that character is so specific and so unique that you learn something interesting, and it really focuses in on being about him and the social forces that force him in that way. Whereas this feels scattered. Like, even the political stuff, I don't really understand what its point is. I genuinely do believe there is a difference between making a film that's sympathetic and edgy and examines a sort of narcissistic male violence that is a small art film that is hard to watch, as opposed to doing the same thing with the language of a modern superhero blockbuster. Like, the end of Taxi Driver does not have swelling music as he like dances on the roof of a car. And I know you're not meant to. The film is not saying he's a hero, but the language of the superhero film, you cannot help but have that be a heroic moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, and there is a complexity to that. I'm not saying there's not, but I don't know. To me, I think that it kind of wants to have it both ways. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wants to be a superhero film. And again, we can get into this later, but like, I fucking hated all the Batman references. I hated it. I think the superhero shit undercuts what could be a smart film. Like, having Bruce Wayne and how many times do we have to see the Wayne parents get shot? And it's not even related to the Joker. Like, he doesn't even do it. Like, it has no bearing on the plot. Like, why do we need to see that? Just because you want to link it to a superhero. Like, I feel like it wants to be a superhero film, but then it wants to be Taxi Driver, and you can't have it both ways, is what I came out thinking. And I know that I feel like I'm coming in really hard and negative, and I didn't feel that negative coming out of the film. Like, I was genuinely probably like a 3 stars coming out, but I think the more I've thought about it, the more it's kind of dropped to like a 2.5, 2 star kind of thing for me. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, I'll get off my little high horse.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I've had a little rant.
No.
I'm very curious. Given that you were more positive on it, John, I'm curious whether your expectations were too high and you were disappointed, or whether your positive state of mind let it kind of like foster more and you exactly
help lift it. I think probably I'm glad we had this discussion about what our thoughts were before the film, because we're almost still on track, I think, because I can agree with a lot of what you just said and see some of this problem and tension in the film, not story tension, but between superhero and character drama and trying to mesh that together. But it worked. I think it worked more for me than it did for you. I really liked this film, and particularly upon first seeing it, like the hour or so after that, I was really high on it. I had that movie high that we often talk about. Where I was like, fuck, I've just seen something that is exciting and I want to talk about it and all that sort of stuff. I think it's really beautifully shot. I absolutely loved the way this movie looked, and I saw it on 70mm
looks great.
as well.
It does look great.
As you said, Matt, like the way to see this is on 70mm if you definitely can project it, because even though it was shot digitally, which I do wish it was shot on film as well.
Yes, definitely.
I know you would agree with that, given the time period and the aesthetic that they're going for. Even so, the fact that it was shot digitally and then transferred to a 70mm print, and then that's played back through a projector, you still get some of that filmy essence, which is like every now and then there's hairs on the reel and like a bit of a stutter. You can see the reels changing. Almost any film, I'm going to love that. You know what I mean? And so I do like that. I'm just going to assume Todd Phillips pushed for a film sort of release, even though it wasn't shot on film. And, that's just going to take me down a tangent, right? Because that's an interesting metaphor, I think. Or metaphor, comparison to what's going on with the movie, right? In that you can see it projected on film, but the work of shooting it in the first place on film didn't take place. You know what I mean? It was shot digitally. So
I feel like you're arguing my point. Yeah,
I am here.
Right. Sorry. Yeah.
But that is, whilst I really like the film, I think it's undeniable that there's a lot of superficialness. That's a bad word going on there, and so it just occurred to me then that it's an interesting comparison to the making of the film, that it was shot digitally, but then he wants to sort of, have his cake and eat it too, or whatever, where I didn't shoot this on film, but I'm going to project it on film, so it feels a bit more, gritty and real sort of thing. That's just a side point that popped into my head that, does suit your analysis more than mine.
Sorry to interrupt before you can get to your proper full explanation of your view, but I feel like this is a perfect example again of the sort of like nostalgic J.J. Abrams side of things. Like, not only is it not shot on film but projected in film, but like, why the fuck is it set in the 70s other than it wants to be Taxi Driver? Like, there is no reason for it to be set in the 70s. And once that penny dropped, that pissed me off as well.
And there's no
or 80s or whatever it is.
I don't have a good defense of that. Other than Taxi Driver. Like, as you say, there's no reason for that. It looks cool, and the period setting is executed flawlessly. I think all the technical side of this film is just top notch. I mean, the score is incredible. It's like a horror score most of the time. And I'm not talking about the songs, but just the compositions that were written.
Oh yeah, there's some problematic songs too. Maybe we could get into that.
Yeah, the songs are a different thing, but there's just some great moments in this with long takes on Joaquin Phoenix with like this eerie music, and I just love that kind of stuff. So yeah, anyway, I have probably come down like half a star or so since seeing the film. I gave it 4 stars on Letterboxd when it came out, and I'm probably sitting at 3.5 now. Just because some of those comparisons to Taxi Driver and King of Comedy they've become more obvious to me in hindsight. And I haven't seen King of Comedy since I was at uni and don't remember much of it. And hearing you talk about those like direct shots and stuff, that is disappointing. But I think mostly, okay, so I feel like I'm rambling here. Here's like my dot points of why I still really like it. I think I was engrossed the whole time in the character, and I think what Joaquin Phoenix does, just like he just fucking hits it out of the park with this character. He's so creepy and interesting, and you feel sorry for him for most of the film, which is interesting as well with what's going on culturally, and as you're saying, like some of the worry surrounding this film. I think, it's shot beautifully. I really like the score. And I really admire that it's just been made. And this goes back to what you said early on. I kind of give it like a whole, out of, I don't know why we keep talking about our ratings in this review. But
it's very strange. We never do.
We don't normally talk about that. But I give it like a whole, like 1 star, maybe more, just
because
having
it exists.
a go. Seriously. Like, it's not perfect, but man, like it's such a nice contrast to what's going on with the Marvel films. And it's not perfect. There's some troubling stuff in it, but it's just cool that DC agreed and Warner Brothers agreed to let this go through. And there is the other side of the argument that you've said about, well, now do we need character dramas that have superheroes?
Yeah, so that's my argument. So it's so fun. I find it so fascinating that you can see the positive in that, whereas for me, it's all negative. Like that is toxic for me. Like, we are coming from the same place, but seeing, it's like a completely opposite. Yeah. For me, I kind of love it.
I just love that. I love that. That we have a different option. Now, is it going to replace a mid-tier budget character study film? I don't know. I think, does that stuff exist anymore in terms of big Hollywood studios funding it and not some indie festival run kind of thing? It's pretty rare. And so if they're not doing it, maybe this is a way, this is kind of Todd Phillips' philosophy, it seems like, that we can get people at the cinema to watch something that challenges them a little bit. But, the way to do it is
see me shaking my head.
The way to do it is to trick them, basically, and slap on some superhero bullshit. I just think it's so fascinating, and in 30 years when we look back, I'm hoping we look back at the fad of superhero stuff, just like we look back at how Westerns ruled Hollywood for so long. We're going to see Joker as one of the first, and maybe like Logan, which was okay. We had problems with that as well. These sort of anti-superhero films, they're not perfect, but it is perhaps the beginning of a let's say postmodern superhero film coming forward, and maybe signifying that we've reached the tipping point of
peak
the Marvel
superhero.
maybe there's still another 10 years of all this shit left.
Oh God, I hope not. Yeah,
but we've reached the peak, and now we're coming down, and I also think like there's politically stuff in it that it says stuff about today and reflects on what's happening culturally today as well. Not overtly. I think it is very muddled, like you say.
Yeah,
but it is interesting that, and we'll get into that. We'll get into some specifics in a bit. I'll put that to one side, because I feel like I'm rambling, but that all this stuff around it is very interesting to me, and I like that the film has provoked all of that and lots of discussion. And again, that gives it like an extra half a star, for me.
Interesting.
Well. So yeah. Did any of that make sense?
No, 100%. I can see that point of view, and it's exactly like what you said. It's like, I feel like we have the same instinct, but it's like you're glass half full and I'm glass half empty, which probably reveals a lot about our individual psyches. I don't know. I feel like I wish I could see it the way you see it, but to me, it's like, I mean, I guess the positive way to look at it is that, like, there is an appetite for, like, an adult drama. That I don't know, that it is in some way engaged with, like, socio-political stuff, right? Like, people seem to be fucking love. If people like this film, they love it. Like, friends of friends have said it's like the best superhero film they've ever seen, kind of thing. Like, that to me, there is an appetite for that. But
there is. Yeah.
I feel like I've been watching films for long enough to know that is not the message that the film industry is going to hear. The film industry is going to hear, we need more superhero films, make them in any way possible, including dark dramas and romances and whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, now, not the message is not interesting character studies are what people want. The message is superhero films in different disguises are what people want, and it's just going to be more and more and more and more superhero films. And
so I agree with that, and I suppose my point would be, if you've got like this pie, the superhero pie, and the Marvel has got like all the slices except one, which is like this little DC bit. Yeah. Isn't it at least nice that there's a few more chunks in that pie now that are, it's still superhero bullshit, but at least it's a little more interesting than just spectacle, That is assuming that this pie is just superhero films, and it's not starting to take slices out of other. Well,
that's the difference, right? Which I don't believe is the case. I feel like it's cannibalizing everything, but. This is a bigger conversation we can have. I would say the other argument that I would put forward is for this not being that sort of like smart, not only like the shallowness of the the surface level remaking of Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, is that like I would still. And maybe this is just a bit dismissive, but I still don't trust Todd Phillips as being a smart filmmaker. I mean, there's parts of this that are smart-ish, but I think, again, they're shallow, mirrors of Scorsese. And you brought it up before, and I think a great example of this is the use of the Gary Glitter song when the Joker dances down the stairs. And, surface level, that's fine. No one gives a fuck. It's just like a fun, like 70s fucking pop rock song. But the fact that it is the song by a friggin' convicted pedophile either is one of two things. It's either complete, there's no thought going into this. It's like, this, and which would back up my theory that there's no thought going into any of it, and it's just like, let's push buttons, or, let's copy Scorsese because it's cool. I mean, obviously there's a little bit of thought. That's being very dismissive, but do you know what I mean? Like, there's not a depth of thought. Or the flip side of that argument to me is that he is deliberately pushing buttons, which again he's not trying to engage with things, but he knows that put a pedophile song in, make a Batman film about a serial killer, and it's not really about any idea. It's about like riling people up and making it different, which, I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into one bit, but it's like flags going off for me that he's not thinking about things in a deep, meaningful way, which would, anyway, that's like a counter argument, I guess, to
I think that's interesting, and that's that's a perspective thing, I think, and that to me that sounds maybe a little too cynical. I just think that I don't think Todd Phillips is like a genius or anything like that.
Yeah.
You can't. I just feel like you can't make something like this, and it's so well crafted. And yes, some of the thematic stuff is muddled, but I think again, like there's a spirit to it of trying something different in this area, and there is thematic stuff in there that's interesting. Now the song choices, I don't know. I'm not sure what's going on there. I don't know whether I am having a hard time defending against.
That's almost like a trump card, right? There's no defending that. Again, I just find that odd, right? Like I don't understand why you would.
It is odd.
It's not like it's inherent in his character. Like you could have picked any sort of like 70s pop rock song. Like why pick that? It's just to me that's like a flag. I don't know.
I think, as I said earlier, I really like the score. The moments with like actual songs were not as interesting to me, and did feel a little like cool, for lack of a better word. Like this is cool to have slow motion and this song over the top of it. But in general, I do think he was trying for something more here, and I see a lot of the backlash against it being quite, and this is not from you, Matt, but in general, like there's a lot of dismissive stuff against the film and against Todd Phillips in general. And I suppose I just feel like as, a creative person or whatever, it's hard to make stuff, and especially if you're known as a raunchy comedy filmmaker that doesn't have much to say, then there's a lot of resistance there for you to make something different and really put yourself out there, and then to be dismissed straight away. Again, you're not doing this.
I feel like I am a little bit, and I don't like that I'm doing that when I hear you say that, because I feel like I'm usually on the opposite side of that, and it's like you want people to be given an opportunity to say something that perhaps didn't have a chance to say in whatever pigeonhole they'd be put in before. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so I find myself kind of sympathizing with that, maybe a bit too much, and putting and creating fan fiction, in my head where it's like you're really trying to do something here, and you've got an interesting idea of mixing these two sort of, something that's really popular at the moment, the superheroes, and then films that you loved growing up, and mixing them together, and some people are telling you that you're an idiot. But that's just me and probably my, social insecurities and anxieties, and projecting them onto other people. Having said all of that, that doesn't mean that you need to automatically like it, right? Yeah.
And so I'm giving it a lot of passes, because I hear myself constantly in this chat saying, at least it's trying, it's trying. And that, I guess, ultimately is my philosophy with this. And I'm also struggling to defend it at times, because it is a personal preference or a personal reflection or whatever that I'm getting from this film, that I just liked sitting there and being shown this version of a superhero film.
Yeah.
And although it's not perfect, I really appreciate that it exists.
Just tangentially, I guess also I agree. I feel like I can feel myself coming off way more negative than I actually felt coming out of the film. And I know I said I'm souring on it more, which I am, but I feel like everything that's coming out of my mouth is super negative, when that is not necessarily the case. But I do have a question for you. Do you think it works as a superhero film? Because I feel like the superhero-ness of it, and take away my own personal superhero bias in the sense that I'm not into it for the most part, but I feel that the fact that they have called this film Joker and linked it to a superhero property is nothing but detrimental to it. I feel like this would be a better film if it was just about a clown that then turned on society, which is in itself an inherent interesting idea.
Yes.
I think the superhero-ness adds nothing and is, if anything, detrimental at every stage. Like, I hate the Bruce Willis, the Bruce Wayne and the Wayne connections. I mean, if Bruce Willis did it, that would have been good. But also just the nature of. I mean, and I'm not a big Batman fan. I basically know nothing about the Joker, but the fact that I mean, from what I understand and what my understanding of the Joker is that the Joker is important because he is the ultimate nemesis for Batman. He is Batman's opposite. Whereas this is not that. This is a damaged man. Like, you know, if he went out into Gotham, Batman could, like, fucking sort him out in 2 seconds. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that character. It is something else. No. And I feel like Joker is just a name on a poster to get people to see it. And that shallowness annoys me as well.
Yes. I agree. I totally agree with that. And so I guess, you know, I'll just keep playing this part as well. Like, that's getting all these people in to see this, you know, quote unquote,
that's the trick it's playing.
Film. That's the trick. And even in terms of the Scorsese stuff, your average film goer is not going to pick up on the references and the inspiration. So in a way, it's like getting, and I don't want to say it like this, but it's like getting them to experience this stuff or showing it to them in a palatable way. Like, you know, here's a hamburger, but the burger actually has like heaps of vegetables.
It's got broccoli on it. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But you can't tell because, you know, it's mixed in with all this other stuff. That's interesting to me.
But
in a perfect world, should Todd Phillips have just made this film as an indie film or whatever, with Joaquin Phoenix and not be called Joker, but be essentially the same film without any of the Batman stuff? He could have done that, yes. And then even my sympathetic sort of feel towards him wanting to expand his horizons, it makes more sense in that setting, right? Just going, you don't have to trick people. Just make the film that you want to make. That's probably a better way to do it, but it's almost like I don't know, you can look at it as cynical or as an experiment in filmmaking. And again, like a sort of commentary, just the release of it is a commentary on film culture of our time and how, you know, the cynical view is even interesting. Like, look, if I call this Joker, all these, you know, people are going to come and see it. Like, what the hell? You know, I can trick people into seeing this film.
Well, okay.
Just by calling it Joker.
I guess that would be my next question. In that, if we buy into the fact that it is the trick is getting people in the cinema, is that the extent of the trick? Like, what does it have to say other than tricked you? You saw a film that kind of looks like Taxi Driver. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like you don't come out of it with any message. Like, there's no meaning to this film. Unless you feel that there is. Personally, that was one of the flaws.
I found stuff in it, but if the average film goer is being tricked into seeing this, what are they getting out of it? They're getting... I think maybe it is just a limited view of cinema.
What cinema can be outside of a superhero film.
What it can be. Right. Yeah, maybe it's just slightly opening that blind or that door.
Yeah.
Pick your object.
Something you can open. Yeah.
Toilet lid. To make them curious.
Yeah.
About what's out there, and that experience, regardless of anything else they're getting out of it, of sitting in there for almost 2 hours or however long
I think it's just over 2 hours. Yeah,
and not having special effects and
no big action scenes. Yeah, 100%. I agree with all that. Like that is something.
Maybe that's just good for the brain, you know.
Good for brain, totally.
Good for brain, yeah. Yeah. So I mean, as far as what I can see in it, it is really muddled, right? There's lots of, it seems to go back and forth on certain ideas a lot. But something I like is that it's coming out now. Everyone's so worried that it's going to sort of inspire this whole incel culture, which is like the most disgusting fucking shitty thing that's come out of the internet for a while. But it's sort of commenting on that as well, I think, and it's showing us what the worst of that culture can be. And in the character's own mind, he's, you know, the hero of a story, and he's, you know, this damaged, quite by the end, like despicable guy. And I just think it's really interesting that this film is coming out now. You know, that this stuff is not to that extreme, but is kind of happening as a result of these groups talking to each other on the internet. Now, again, the films have nothing to do with the internet or him connecting with other people or whatever, but I don't know.
I think it's trying to be a little bit like that with the like social, where it gets a bit muddled, but there's like a band of people that like congregate around him.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was the other thing I quite liked, is that which made me think of Donald Trump and stuff, is that this group are now that this is where it goes back and forth, and I'm correcting myself before I even finish the sentence, so just stay on track. There's this group, then this upswelling of people that are so fed up with the system that they're in that they're willing to put their faith in this literal clown, and who gives a fuck about his morals or what he's done? He's killing people, and they're cheering for it. And that car scene was where that really brought it home to me, that this anarchy and chaos and murder that he has caused, Trump, you know, hasn't quite caused that dystopia, but politically there are things like that going on, and they're cheering for him because they've got no one else to turn to. And that, to me, I really saw that in that moment, and so that's why that moment really worked for me, whereas it was quite iffy for you.
Yeah, I just feel like I didn't quite it felt like it wanted it to be both way, or maybe it's just like an overly simplistic way of viewing things. You know what I mean? Like even just his whole trajectory to becoming the Joker is just nothing but one scene of like horrible abuse to the next. Do you know what I mean? Like there's no balance, and I just to go back to Taxi Driver as a good counterpoint, which is fucking welcomed by the film. Like the Sybil Shepherd character, like he interacts with the real world in Taxi Driver, and you understand his point of view and how he deforms into this violent man, but there is a counterpoint to it, and you can see you sort of there's a more, I don't know, complicated and sophisticated look at how he is like twisted by society, how he feels alienated by this part of society that he is not a part of, but then also idolizes in the form of Sybil Shepherd. Whereas for the Joker, it's just like, do a job, get beaten up. Like, go to your mum and find out that you were fucking adopted. Like, go to your dad, get punched in the head. Like, of course he's gonna fucking kill someone. Like, by the end, I'm like, yes, like, fuck. It's just so simplistic. Like, which is where I think it slips into slightly dangerous, because I can feel like you said, the internet trolls watch that and go, fuck yeah, that's my life. You know what I mean? Like, I want to stand on that fucking car boot and have the music swell and everyone, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's no nuance to it. It's like, it's so, yes, there's an A, B, C, he gets there. Like, you understand, but there's no, I don't know, it's just, there's a simplicity to it and a muddledness to the politics, because I don't really understand, like, I mean, I guess this is exactly what I said. There's no counterpoint. Like, you hate the clown people because they're violent psychos, but then you hate the rich, but even though the rich guy is like trying to help them, but he's rich, so he's a dickhead. Like everyone's just a douche. I don't know. Like I don't understand what its I don't understand what its point is, other than everything's fucked. You know?
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of that. I think everything's fucked.
Yeah,
and there seems to be some commentary that if you drift to the extreme left of politics or the extreme right of politics, it's the same, and they're like you end up foregoing any sense of moral decency just to get your point, and that's why I think you have the Trump stuff with them supporting him, but their actual message is more like a far left kind of
it's weird, right? Yeah, totally.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, and
so that is hard to square for sure, and even like the stuff with Thomas Wayne, I like that just on a different point of view. I like that we're presented with a Wayne and Bruce Wayne's dad as like being like a bit of a rich asshole, rather than this altruistic kind of.
That's
guy.
true.
I think that is just an interesting
like twist on the Batman mythos. Yeah,
and then you have this idea that he produces, and this is a whole other discussion, but let's just almost thematically, he produces two split opposites in this world.
Yeah.
One being the Bruce Wayne and the who wants to fight for good, and the other is the losing end of the spectrum, who has no support, no money, no nothing, and who turns against the system.
Yeah.
That is, you have to read into that, right? It's there in the film, but it's not as explored as much as it could be. And that's where the Batman stuff could have been very interesting, I think. I actually like the idea that Thomas Wayne has this illegitimate son who like got nothing and was abandoned and turns out to be...
Did you read that as what
opposite of Bruce Wayne?
Did you read that as what happened, or that his mum was?
I think the movie really wants you to think that his mum was nuts, and I don't like that interpretation. There's enough room there that you can believe that she was kind of being gaslit.
Yeah,
and
especially the photo at the end where it said "love your eyes" or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. And the flashback, they're telling her, they're like, no, don't you remember? Like, you never had a relationship with him. This son is adopted. He's not really your son. So there is a grey there. And it's way more interesting if he slept with like his maid or whatever. She got pregnant. He couldn't deal with it because he's rich and it would be a scandal, so he fucked her off.
Faked that it was
has enough power to like send her to the asylum and all that kind of stuff. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And the comic bookiness fits in a bit more than if you've got these... I mean, the age difference is weird between them.
I was just going to say, if you play this out, then when Batman's Batman, Joker's like 70 or something. Yeah.
It doesn't quite work. But thematically that you have... The kid of privilege and the kid of nothing, and how they try to use their...
Yeah, no, that's a good reading, yeah.
Their upbringings. I mean, that's really in the background.
But that does play into that sense that Joker is like Batman's inherent opposite, you know what I mean?
Opposite,
like, yeah. That's true.
Yeah, so that... The comic booky stuffy, worksy, there-y.
That's a good reading. I hadn't really thought of that. That's true.
But in general... and Sophie, my wife, felt the same way. Like, whenever it gets too comic booky, it really loses
because it doesn't feel like... it doesn't want to be a comic book film. So when that comes in... No. Exactly.
And that's where this trick I'm talking about of, like, getting people in, it kind of falls apart a bit, because you're in one world, which is, like, this oppressive, gross, apartment in Gotham, quote-unquote, New York. And then every now and then you have to go to, like, Arkham Asylum, and there's he steals the papers and reads over it, and then there's flashbacks, and he goes to visit Wayne Manor, and where you presumably see like a young Alfred as well, and it just doesn't feel like it connects to the rest of the movie. So I think for sure that doesn't doesn't quite connect. And you're right, like, if Batman comes to fruition in this world, he would easily be able to kick this guy.
Yeah, seriously,
you know,
yeah.
He's not.
He
a
is not a
mastermind.
supervillain.
I guess
no, he's just a damaged, sad guy. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the only excuse perhaps you could come up with for future things is that he has this sort of army now.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I suppose
he sends them to do a lot of his dirty work.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's certainly. He's more confident at the end, but he's not more intelligent or anything like that, you know. So yeah, it doesn't quite work as an actual DC Joker, but you know, it's a standalone experiment, and I think that's okay. But then I suppose, see, and this is what I keep doing. The flip side, like, then why have the Bruce?
That's what I
even like set it in Gotham, fine, but. Just don't even have
I would much prefer it if it didn't, because it felt like its own thing. Every time that came in for me, it was like, it reminded me that it was comic booky, and I was like, what's the point? Like, why? This film is not that. Like, there's no need for it. But yeah. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you've talked me around a little bit, and like I said, I didn't hate it when I watched it, and I still don't hate it, and I do respect some of the stuff it's done. Yeah, I certainly don't think it's worth the praise coming out of Venice. Yeah, I don't know.
No, I think a lot of that praise was an amped up version of
the it's just like the sheer difference of it and the audacity of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it's presented in a very finely crafted way, and Joaquin's performance is outstanding, and so I can imagine seeing that at Venice. There's been no buzz really at that point. It was like probably the first public.
Yeah, it was. I think that's where it first screened.
Yeah. You would just be like, holy shit. You know,
yeah, this is not fucking Thor Ragnarok 2 or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it is making people talk, and it's for people that love it or hate it, and I'm sure there's lots of interesting discussions coming out from the general public after they see it. And so I think that is a positive.
I think to end it on that note, the best thing about this film is the discussions I've had with friends and colleagues at work. Like, everyone wants to talk about this film and everyone has a different opinion on it. And I find it fascinating. And like I said, it seems very polarizing. Like, it's hard to find someone that's in the middle. Like, I think I said, I don't know if it was on mic, but like, you know, my girlfriend had a friend that said it was literally the best superhero film he's ever seen. And he's like better than The Dark Knight. Like, he just loved it more than anything he'd ever seen. Whereas I also have a woman that I work with who despised it, thought it was like trash. Like, it's rare to have a film that polarizes people so much. And like I said, the discussions that are coming out of it are great. It's worth it just to talk about it. Even this, like, I feel like, I know we've been off for 6 months, but this is like a great fucking discussion, and we've split, which never happens.
No, exactly. Yeah. It is really interesting in that way. And the film has to be doing something. And whether you think that it's doing something right or wrong, it is provoking this feedback and discussion. And that is more interesting than everyone just loving, whatever the last fucking... Yeah,
Endgame or whatever it's called,
Endgame, Part 2 or whatever. I didn't see it. People are going to hate that. Like, but I'm just not... I'm not seeing those movies anymore. I'm just not. So... Yeah. Everyone loves that and is jizzing over it. Cool, I get it. That's fine, but this is interesting. Yeah,
I'll give it that 100%. Yeah. All right, so maybe we'll wrap it up there. And if listeners, you want to stick around, we'll do a little recap of some stuff we've been watching and recent films that we've enjoyed. Yeah, sound good?
Yeah, totally. Let's do it.
All right, John.
Enough Joker talk.
enough Joker talk. What have we been watching? Let's have just a little brief little chat about a couple of films that we've seen.
Yeah.
Since the last pod.
Well, shall we pick?
Given that we're on a little horror-y dark vibe, let's
on a clown vibe.
Let's go Midsommar. Well,
I thought you were going towards it then.
Well, actually, I forgot all about that. I feel like let's start later. Let's go chronologically.
Okay.
Let's go Midsommar.
Yeah. Okay.
Because we haven't spoken about that, and I feel like that was very high on both of our most anticipated lists of the year, given that we both loved Hereditary.
Yes.
What did you think of Midsommar?
Yeah.
Just your brief thoughts. We'll have a brief
I absolutely loved Midsommar and still do. Let's just keep the ratings thing going. I think I gave it 4.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. It is just the sort of film I love from first frame to end. It's not perfect, but it's a John Boy film. And so I was absolutely blown away by it. I mean, it's a slow burn, maybe a little too slow at times, but I loved it. I loved the meshing. This is the thing we've been talking about of form and theme. I loved it. It wasn't as scary as Hereditary, but this surreal otherworldliness of it I really liked. I think it was almost Lynchian at times, which I thought was great. The whole idea of it being daytime just lends itself to this strange atmosphere. Again, not really scary, but just a bit unsettling and unreal. Whenever I think of the film in my mind, I think of the fields and how bright it was and almost shimmery. And there are literally scenes where things are shimmering and moving around, and because they've taken a bunch of drugs.
The hallucinogens. Yeah.
I really, really loved it. I think, shot beautifully. I love, any horror film that's just got lots of long takes. I'm always fucking up for that. I thought the performance from the main actress was amazing. I feel bad I can't remember her name.
Florence Pugh, I think her name is.
That's it. It's her movie, basically.
She's almost in every frame of it. Just almost.
And I love the climax and how it all comes together and how just fucked up the ending is. And how much it leaves for you to think about and interpret, and in a very smart way, I think. Different from what we were saying with the Joker, where you really have to dig in and kind of half make stuff up. This lays out a bunch of stuff in front, it's like a fine meal in front of you, and you can just take all these lovely ingredients and make something, of your own.
Take some magic mushrooms and make a beautiful
have a nice feast where you're probably eating some people that have previously been killed in a pie.
Awesome. Yeah, some pubic hair and period blood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I as we get talking, there'll probably be specifics because it was a while ago that I saw it. What were your general thoughts?
I mean, this we're going to mirror the Joker discussion here. This was probably one of my most anticipated films of the year. So I loved Hereditary so much. I am not as negative on it as I am on Joker, but I was a little disappointed with this. I feel like it's too long is the main issue with it for its simplicity. And I agree that it does have something to say, but the stuff that it has to say is very obvious, and then I don't mean that in a negative way. It just says it very easily, and it doesn't need 2.5 hours to say what it has to say.
I would agree with that.
My main problem, and I feel like, and maybe this has something to do with my own expectations. I was very excited to see what he could do with making sunlight scary, and exactly like what you said, he kind of didn't do that, which again inherently is not a bad thing, but I feel like he does then lean into some generic scares which happen in the dark, which was disappointing to me. I mean, I guess there's probably two. Really, there's only two jump scares, and both of them happen in the one. Florence Pugh goes into a toilet, and it's dark in there, and then she sees there's a jump scare in the mirror, and then further on down the film, there's in a dark room where someone's trying to steal a book, and there's another jump scare, and I just felt that to me felt a little bit cheap. Because, I don't know, maybe I just felt he was better than that given how successful Hereditary was. But no, I agree, it's beautifully shot, performances are great. I do wish there was a bit more nuance to the characters, or a bit more nuance to the relationship, again, given the runtime. I feel like from literally almost scene one, you know that their relationship is fucked, and I guess the counter argument is that's sort of the point, but as a dramatic arc, there's no arc. It is fucked from scene one, and it stays fucked until the end, and you're just waiting for Florence Pugh to realize.
It's
which may be a reality of a bad relationship, but it's not an interesting dramatic watch.
I think there's definitely something there that it's the slow decay of a relationship, and then a literal decay at the end.
But I mean, I guess my point is I wish it was a decay, because I feel like it is already dead and decayed at the beginning, and it's flat lines for the whole film. I feel like it would have been more successful with even something like The Shining is a better example, where yes, the relationship is dead, but as an audience we don't know that. But you subsequently discover that through the course of the film by the odd interactions Jack Nicholson has with his son and wife, and it sort of peels the layers back for the audience, even if the characters themselves know that it's all fucked deep down. Whereas this, it is very clear very early on from when she finds out. I mean, I guess we're in spoiler territory here, and it starts the film. But when she finds out her parents and sister are dead, the way he reacts to that is it's very clear that the relationship's fucked.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, I'm getting into specifics. I think overall, it is something to be commended. It looks great. It's unique. It's original. The visual representation of what it's like to take hallucinogenic drugs is spot on, and I feel like films often, this is a weird nitpick, but I feel like films often misrepresent that sort of thing, whereas this nails it exactly what it's like, and I really give it props for that. It is very authentic. I don't know. I just it felt a little bit obvious to me as well. You see that big triangular house at the very beginning, and you instantly know
for sure
that is where the film is going to end.
And
to me, it wasn't as fucked up as I wanted it to be honest. It was just let's burn some people. I thought it was going to get more crazy than it did.
Interesting. I think.
But anyway, I'm sounding more negative than I probably am, because I did like the film. I wasn't blown away with it.
We were spoiled by Hereditary a little bit, because that movie has such shocking stuff in it, and is also very frightening and creepy. And
thematically rich. Fuck, that's a dense film.
Yeah,
you can read so much into that.
More so than Midsommar. But Midsommar is a meditation on, I think is the appropriate word, on the very, the last gasp of air in a relationship stretched out over the 2 weeks that they're there, and the 2.5 hours or whatever that we're watching the film. So, I love the film. I did feel that length as well. There's stuff they probably could have cut out and tightened it up just a little bit, I think. Or, as you say, in the writing, have a few more ups and downs in the relationship. But in terms of what Ari Aster wanted to do, I don't think he was interested in that. I think he wanted to have that prolonged kind of feeling, because can feel like that in the relationship. And what I really
apparently it's very personal. I think he was coming out of a really bad relationship. Anyway,
it is an abstraction of something he was going through when he wrote it, and that idea I love as well. That when it is a weird dream, and it's a weird dreamy representation of going through that experience. I don't know. There's just something I really like about that, or if you could push your mind into like another dimension, here's like a visual representation of what you have been feeling. And speaking about the triangular like hut thing, and unless I'm mistaken, the visual of that is very similar to the cubby house at the end of Hereditary, right? So I'm sure that was
I never put those 1 and 2 together. Maybe, yeah.
Thing. And so I found
it is definitely a wooden hut in the trees.
Yeah, I mean, I might be wrong, but in my memory of that is that it was quite triangular, and so I feel like there's some
interesting
connection there. And he's kind of said like these are the only 2 horror films he has in him, but there is this connection there of the climax of these 2 stories happening in this like weirdly angular kind of building.
Yeah, very interesting. I like that.
Yeah,
and I do. As much as I know I'm coming off as negative, and like I said, I do like it. I feel like this is a film that could grow on me the more I see it, and like there is no fucking doubt that his filmmaking is impeccable, and it's like exactly what you said at the beginning, like long takes, like great performances.
Yeah,
I mean, hearing that he feels like he only has 2 horror films in him is so fucking exciting to me, because I feel like, you know, I want him to be our next Kubrick or something. Like, try different genres. I want him to, like, delve into something else, because I feel like he has the chops.
I agree.
Even if this didn't, like, land 100% for me, like, I can see the intent, and... Like, this is the opposite of Joker for me. You know what I mean? Like, this has richness and skill and talent and intent behind it. And even if I don't think it worked 100%, this guy is talented. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, our Joker discussion and my defense of it is taking place in a different mind space almost. It's like the superhero world and how I appreciate it in that context. But I completely agree about Ari Aster, and there are moments in Hereditary as well that like made me think of Kubrick, and not because they're copying him, but just in the feel.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Yes, it's not mimicry. It's it's the intent behind the style or something. There's more to it. Yeah, completely.
It's just like. You know, there's
or
one
confidence.
Shot, it's a confidence. The technical side sometimes of the long takes. Kubrick really liked symmetry in a lot of his shots, and I feel like Ari Aster does too. Like flat, like pure profile kind of shots. He seems to love Ari Aster, and there's also this great shot where they're at the dinner table, the big zigzaggy dinner table, and it's like above. And they have to wait for like the old people to like pick up their knife and fork, and then as they do, you get the domino effect of like crisscrossing at the table, and it's just this slow pan that shows it, and it's just I just love that kind of shit, man.
Yeah, I'm totally on board, man. Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah, love it. Okay, well, both thumbs up. It sounds like you perhaps more enthusiastically than me, but I'm willing to be convinced that I've missed something, or my expectations led me down the more of a negative path. But let's stick with the horror theme and what you thought I was going to pitch to before. It too. I mean, did we do an episode on It Part 1? I can't remember.
Yeah, we did.
Chapter 1?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did. It Chapter 1.
You're the Stephen King fanboy. Hit us with your thoughts on It Chapter 2.
Well, I think... It Chapter 1 we both liked, and I really liked. I thought it was a really solid adaptation of the kid part of that story. It wasn't the arty, again, Kubrick-y version that we could have got with Cary Fukunaga. Putting that to a side, we got like a fun, almost Goonies-esque version of it with the kids, and I was okay with that. It's not the version I would have loved, but I enjoyed it, and I thought it was pretty good. Chapter 2, I think, kind of shits on all that. I think Chapter 2 is quite bad, actually, and like the definition of a fizzer, where, you know, you're excited for something and it's just you know, farts away.
Shits the bed.
Yeah, shits the bed. I think it's there's an inherent problem with that the book is you're switching all the time between the kids and the adults, and so you're getting this contrast. And then there's thematic ideas of like looking back on your childhood as an adult and coming back home and all that stuff. It's kind of not in this film. Because it, calm down, John. One thought at a time. when in the book, the adult stuff, there's definitely less adult stuff, and so they have to make up a lot of shit in this second film, and then also weirdly invent more flashbacks that we never saw in the first movie, which is just
this makes no sense.
This is such a bad idea, and I'm not. In retrospect, maybe this should have been 1 or 2 films, but where the adults and the kids were in both. I think that was probably the way to adapt it, because there's just very little to hold on to here. The dynamics between the adults, they've tried to replicate what happened with the kids, with them calling each other names and like roughing each other up, and it just doesn't work for me. I didn't feel like these were.
I agree.
I didn't feel any chemistry between these adult leads. They swear at each other all the time, and it just feels a bit forced and nasty. And it's like, fuck your mother, and it's like it just doesn't feel like something adults would say in their situation. And then there's these weird flashbacks where they've also done some de-aging on the kids.
I noticed that as well,
and it just looks weird. It's like it's not full uncanny valley, but it's really on that edge, and there's this sheen over them and like a bit of bloom or kind of lighting or something that just looks weird. And then the flashbacks we never saw them. They aren't really necessary. They're not scary. I think Pennywise is wasted in this film. There's one good scene with him, which is the most subdued scene in the film, under the rafters with the little girl, where he's doing what people find interesting about him and scary, where it's just him tricking someone, and it's really chilling. And then there's another good scene, I suppose, with the old lady, which was the trailer as well. That has some good tension, but the rest of it is kind of wasted. That they explain the origins of Pennywise, which they shouldn't have done, and particularly not in such a weird CG way. Just a fizzer. I have a feeling you'll probably echo everything I just said.
I mean, you can hear me sort of agreeing and probably see me nodding along. Yeah, I mean, I hate to continue my negative streak on this comeback episode of the pod, but yeah, this really didn't fucking work for me. And I mean, maybe it was exacerbated by the fact that I hadn't read the book, but it just felt so fucking superfluous. Or like it made the first film seem superfluous. Like exactly what you said, like that it seems like the point of this film is that the adults have to like face their childhood traumas that they've sort of forgotten, but are re-emerging when they get back to the town. But instead of making some interesting way where they reconnect that to the first film, they just have flashbacks to the kids and have new traumas happen. Like there is literally no need for the first film now. Like just fucking bin it, because everything is in the chapter 2. It is stupid. It is so stupid. And like you said, most of them are unscary, apart from the old woman and that one scene under the whatever it is, the seats at the baseball game or whatever it is. I mean, the performances are fine. I would agree with you that, I mean, everyone seems to be praising Bill Hader as this like comic force in the film, but I again didn't find him that funny. It was the same. The comedy felt juvenile, which worked to an extent with the kids, but I feel like even in our review of the first one, I felt like it was a bit forced in the first one, and it feels worse when it's adults. I don't know. It just, like, nothing really worked for me in this, to be fair. I mean, other than the fact that it was, like, it's competently shot. I mean, that sounds like faint praise, but, like, it's a big budget horror film, which is rare, and I do genuinely mean that as a compliment. So I don't know. I was very, very disappointed and quite bored for a lot of it. A lot of the CGI, like horror-y stuff is just like flat out not scary, borderline stupid, like it almost funny kind of thing. And I mean, I don't know how far you want to go, but like the treatment of the homosexuality of the story is problematic at best and fucking downright cowardly at worst, I think. Like, it opens with a very horrific homophobic attack, which in itself could have been an impetus for a theme that ran throughout the film about the town being evil and certain characters in the film feeling repressed, but the film never has the courage to fully explore that. And the one Bill Hader's character who is very, very lightly implied is gay. Like the film is too scared to fully embrace that, which feels like insulting given the ferocity of the opening scene. Like, if you're going to open with that, back it up with like at least letting your main character actually, you know, have a openly gay relationship. Like, I don't know, it just felt very, very cowardly to me, and problematic.
No, I totally agree about that. Like, that opening is in the book, but it's more it's like one of the guys is giving a statement to the police, so it's not explicit in that same way that it is in the film. And the film seems to be setting up that as a theme, and then really doesn't do anything with it. And you know, if you're prepared to show this horrific violence but then scared to have a character just say that they're gay, like,
it's so hypocritical. Or, I don't know if hypocritical is the right word, but just cowardly.
And I think that also goes to, we talked about this last week off pod, that it's the only instance maybe where they have, like, the town itself is infected by this kind of weirdness and this hatred, which is a little bit in the kids' version of the first film.
That's one of the best parts of the first film, even though it's a small part. Totally.
And that seems to be abandoned in this, and that's such an interesting part of that world and that story, and it's just dropped for sort of no reason. And that makes it a little more believable too, or you can suspend your disbelief a little more. If the town is infected in this way, then you know, the fact that these kids are suffering and then these adults are suffering, but no one else notices or gives a shit, it kind of makes a bit more sense, rather than them just running around as adults, like, screaming, and no one else knows, like, what the fuck is actually happening. But going back to your point too about that it's shot well and that it's big budget, and
it does look good.
It does, and it raked in a lot of money at the box office. So I'm hoping that something good to come out of this is that people like, you know, Del Toro can make
it's a good point,
get more money for their projects and make these.
This is like
horror films.
Totally, it's a good omen for big budget horror films in general. The fact that this is not a good one is disappointing, but the fact that the box office receipts prove that, you know, they can be successful. So this is a good example of, like, where something like The Joker is the success of it is a net positive, at least for my personal taste. You know, I want more big budget horror. That would be, like, right in my fucking wheelhouse. Give me more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like, if Del Toro can finally make one of his Lovecraft films, with a budget like this, like, fuck, man, that would be great. So the last sort of film we might chat about in this little catch-up, that's been a big release recently, Matt, is new Tarantino film.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the film that he seemed that encapsulates everything that Tarantino loves and is obsessed with.
Yeah, in a sense,
What are your thoughts on that? We haven't talked about this.
We have not, actually.
Maybe I saw your Letterboxd review, but I can't remember it. So I don't know what you think at all. So I'm curious.
I really like this film. My experience watching this film was unique, I guess, in the sense that, I mean, it's not unique. It's what everyone fucking had when they went and sat down expecting a Tarantino film, right? Like, you expect violence, you expect bombastic action and pithy dialogue. I mean, I guess you get the pithy dialogue, but you don't expect a lethargic, you know, 2.5 hour, like, meditation on, you know, early, the sunset days of Hollywood. You know, that's a little jarring, and it probably took me a good hour to come to terms with what the film was. But I feel like there was almost like a switch that flicked in my brain about like an hour in when I realised that this film is really kind of just a hangout film. And once that switch flicked, I had a ball with this film. I would like, okay, maybe a little bit of context. I feel like we probably did Hateful Eight on this. I'm not sure if we did a podcast on Hateful Eight. We've definitely talked about it off pod. I mean, I love Tarantino, but specifically some of his like more violent stuff, I've often felt a little icky. I think this was our Revenant Hateful Eight discussion, and anyway, sometimes I feel like it's problematic, even though I admire everything he does and I love what he stands for and his like views on cinema. But some of the violence and language, I sometimes bristles me as much as I love him. And this didn't have that at all. And I'm coming out of this, I would almost like go as far to say that this is, having not seen Jackie Brown for a long time, to me this felt like his most restrained, his most mature film. He wasn't interested in giving the audience any sort of like, you know, showy, bombastic carnage. I mean, with the exception of one scene. And it's also his most character-driven. Like, just before watching this film, me and my girlfriend watched Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 back-to-back, which I hadn't watched in a long time. And I loved those films when they came out. But rewatching them now, and this was before I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like, the surface level, like, fizz of them was very apparent. I mean, they're so much fun, and that surface level fizz is, like, heroin. Like, put it in my veins. Like, I could watch it all day fucking long, but there is no character in that. Like, what is the bride? Like, she just wants revenge. That is it. Whereas, like, the relationship between Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is so nuanced and so unique. Like, I kept expecting there to be like a falling out or something would like cross the line between like employee, employer, but it's just this like really beautiful, unique relationship where they both understand what their roles are. They're both comfortable with them. It's like it's like a slightly cheesy line, but it's something in the film where it's like, you know, like more than a brother, less than a wife or something. Like they just have this closeness, and they both completely understand. They're both in this like twilight aspect of their careers. It was really beautiful and touching. I loved spending time with them. I mean, also, I guess another little bit of background, like I happen to know a little bit about the Manson murders, and I knew that the Manson murders were part of this film. And there was specifically the scene where Sharon Tate or Margot Robbie goes to the cinema and watches herself on screen, which I think is a beautiful, beautiful, touching scene. But watching that, my stomach dropped, thinking that I don't want to watch her get murdered. Like, because I knew what was coming, or I thought I knew what was coming, I should say. Yeah. And a part of me felt a little bit ill by that, because it was really getting to me at that point, like in the sense that I was really connecting with these characters and enjoying hanging out with them. And then when it takes that revisionist turn, and I know people have a bit of a problem with the violence, and I understand that perhaps this is almost his most problematic piece of violence, given that no violence comes before it, and it is inflicted on real-world people. But I get that impetus in the sense that he is someone that's so passionate about cinema that this is his kind of like, if I could go back in time and meet those fucking Manson family members, this is what I would fucking do to them. And I know that's brute and like shallow, but there's an impulse in me that understands that. And the last thing I'll say in my initial impressions is that I never thought I would tear up in a Tarantino movie. I teared up at the end of this film just watching Sharon Tate walk out of her house. And I just had this overwhelming emotional experience where I was like, fuck, what if this is such a beautiful love letter to cinema, and what if this woman could have survived? Like, it's his warmest, it is by far his warmest film. I don't know, I mean, it does have that scene of violence, and the scene in the I mean, the scene in the where they go to the old movie set, the western, where Brad Pitt goes the ranch. Sorry, yes, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Is so fucking tense, but it's also a brilliant example of like how he's undercutting his own audience, because you think it's going to kick off, and then it's just this kind of like guy that just wants to hang out with some young girl because he's like dying and blind and. I don't know. There's such a somber sweetness to this film that I just did not expect. I mean, it is long and it's like shaggy, but once I embraced that, I fucking loved hanging out with those characters. And I mean, I don't think I'd put it up there with his best yet, but I feel like this is a good. I'm glad we're ending with this, or at least we're talking about it now, because I'm going in positive mode now. I love this film, John. Yeah. And it's like, this is a film that is like growing in my estimation. I feel like the more I watch this, I will enjoy it more and more. And I know a lot of it is personal bias. Like, I love cinema, obviously. Like, it's speaking to me. I love that era of cinema. Yeah, I don't know. But it's also, like I said, it's just the warmness and that idea of like, it's like what Inglourious Basterds did, but instead of being a cynical take on like, fuck the Nazis, it's like a positive, beautiful take on like, let's pretend and use cinema to give this beautiful young actress a chance, you know? Like, there's something really sweet and lovely about that, and I don't know, it's just not what I expected from him, man. Like, he seems so cynical and into the violence and gore, like... I don't know, it felt like he's growing up. And there's like, one more tiny example before I let you talk.
Please.
Is the scene with DiCaprio where he performs, like, he's really, I mean, the scene in the trailer where he wigs out is amazing. But then when he performs his lines and like fucking nails it and like throws the little girl on the floor or whatever, like as part of the act, not in a bad way, and then she comes up and she like whispers to him like, that's the best acting I've ever seen. And like, my instinct for a Tarantino film is like, something's going to undercut this, right? Like, that's going to be a joke or like a fantasy sequence, or there's going to be some like snarky,
she's joking,
funny like self-referential gag. But it's not. Like, it's just this, like, he just gives him this, like, beautiful little moment. I don't know.
And it's really meaningful to him.
Yeah, too. Totally. Like, he's really invested in these characters. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I really, really like this film and could love it, I think, the more I think about it and the more I watch it. Anyway. Tear me down, John. Be the negative one in this conversation.
No, I think I might not be quite there with you, but I'm close. And... I had a similar experience of watching it. I would say that it didn't click for me even during the film.
Interesting.
Or immediately after. I came out a bit befuddled and probably slightly negative.
Interesting.
My initial thoughts were, it's a bit indulgent. It requires too much knowledge, outside
of the Manson stuff, and
of the Manson stuff.
I can understand that.
If you didn't love that period of Hollywood as well, I can imagine. Why are we having long shots of cars going past buildings?
Yeah, I think
it's very nostalgic if you're into it, but otherwise no. And so I bristled a bit at all that stuff, and probably. Contributing to that was I saw the movie with my wife, and she didn't know any of that context at all.
Interesting.
And so her reading of the movie was like, what
the fuck was that?
Yeah, exactly, basically. But I knew enough about the Manson stuff that I knew Sharon Tate was going to be killed, or so I thought, as you said, and. I love old Hollywood as well. I don't have a great knowledge of that particular time period, but I just love the look and feel. And so I liked that stuff. And I liked individual scenes as well. I liked that acting scene. I liked pretty much any time Leo and Brad were talking. I liked the scene with Brad and... what's his name? The martial arts dude.
Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee. I love
that. Is hilarious.
Brad and Bruce Lee. That's just a really funny scene. The tension in when he goes to the ranch.
That's
I
amazing.
like a lot of individual elements
Yeah.
But at first, I didn't see any cohesiveness, and it felt a bit messy and indulgent. But I think that click did switch, or switch did click, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, in my head after. And probably, you know, if I'm just be transparent too, reading up on the film as well and getting a bit more historical context, listening to interviews with Tarantino, I grew to appreciate the film more after that. And I'm very close to your loving of the film, I think. I'd like to see it again, and with this kind of new perspective. I think that would probably ramp it up a bit in my mind. But I agree, it's his most grown-up film, for sure. And that is potentially why the violence at the end feels nasty, because his violence before it's realistic but cartoony almost, or just he loves cinema and that he loves gore, and so that it fits in this like cinema pastiche kind of way. But in this film, even though the people that are getting punished were reprehensible, in real life, completely reprehensible, because in the movie we don't see them do anything like that.
It's true. You need that knowledge of what they were going to do.
You need the knowledge. Yeah. So when it was happening, I was like, well, these people did horrible stuff in real life. But Sophie was just like pretty horrified by it. And even knowing what they did, like the repeated bashing of the head of this woman, it's just like, it made me very uncomfortable. And
see, that's so funny. That is so funny, because like I felt the same uncomfortableness with stuff in like Hateful Eight. Yeah. Whereas I think, no, that's just very interesting. Yeah.
So I agree. That is really interesting, and I think probably for me, because that's such a cinematic genre.
Yeah, it's very heightened and bombastic.
Experiments, that I could deal with the violence in that, even the violence against women. It fits in that world.
No, hearing you say this makes a lot of sense in terms of the Hollywood. Like, obviously it's very hard for me to remove myself, because I knew, like, you know, they killed a fucking pregnant woman. Like, I was like, fuck you. But I can imagine someone coming in cold and being like, why are you showing this girl get her face smashed against the wall like 5 times or whatever?
Yeah, and like they just seem like incompetent stoners that are trying to kill someone, but then they're really bad at it.
That is true. That is true.
Horrifically killed. But, you know, I struggle with how much of that is on the viewer and how much of that is on Tarantino.
It's a very interesting question.
If he was more of a niche filmmaker, I mean, he is, but if he didn't have this brand, let's say, awareness that draws in, like, everyone still goes. Like, he's one of the few directors around still that everyone goes to see the new Tarantino film. And this is his most... It is indulgent in a way, and not necessarily a bad way, but it's his most insular... You need to know this knowledge that I know. Yeah,
totally. Literally for a plot point. Like, the other stuff is like dripping with cinema knowledge, but you don't need to know it to enjoy it.
Yeah.
That is so true.
Exactly. Yeah, and then so I wonder, like, where does maybe it's like 50-50 in terms of if an audience member goes in not knowing anything, like, is it on them? By this point, should we just... You know, has Tarantino earned the right to just do whatever he wants? Like, I don't know. It's just interesting to think
it almost weirdly like ties back to our Joker discussion, John, in terms of the like references to Scorsese and what impetus the audience and the filmmaker have in terms of what the, like, as you said, like, most people seeing Joker don't know the Taxi Driver and King of Comedy references. They see this as a wholly unique original piece of art. Or, like, I mean, I guess that's art referencing art, whereas this is art referencing real life. But it is the same sort of sense of, like, what do you bring into the cinema with you when you sit down to watch a film? Like, what is the audience... What is the responsibility of the audience, like you said, and what is the responsibility of the filmmaker to inform the audience? Yeah, and I don't have a fucking answer to that.
No. Yeah, I don't know if there is a set answer. Like, it's just an interesting discussion. And that also links to, like, Tarantino in general, he references all kinds of stuff, but he references a feel and a mood more than direct pulling shots. Sometimes there's direct references, but his whole filmography is like referencing stuff that's inspired him and taking ideas, but not in a not like Joker does. He turns it into his own new creation, and continues to do so with this, which is really interesting. And I wonder too. On the discussion of the knowing the history, another sort of, I suppose, negative first thought I had coming out is I would have rathered if this film was just the hangout movie without the stuff.
Interesting.
And we just spent time in this period, and it was about this guy struggling to find relevance, and that's it. I think that could have been a very interesting.
I mean, that is a potent story in itself. Completely agree. Which I think is one of the strengths of the film. My question was, Soph, your wife, the negative reaction she had to the film to begin with, I presume afterwards you explained to her like what the happened in terms of the Manson family murder. Yeah. Did that change her view of the film retrospectively, or did she still feel?
No, not a great deal. No, I think because the film didn't, like, it has nothing to do with that really. What really happened, as in, there's no sense if you're blind to it that was even really going to happen. Like it feel, as I said, they just feel like incompetent stoners in this. Right.
So she still didn't feel that violence was justified, knowing
it made a bit more sense to her.
Right.
She's like, oh, okay, that's why that happened. But I don't.
Didn't sit well. Yeah.
It didn't change her opinion.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
because it's just very hard for me to distance myself from that, and I'm very aware of that, and I guess that's.
Totally.
I mean, that's almost a criticism in its own right? Like, this is a film that spoke to me in many ways that it won't speak to other people. And like I said, like, I didn't expect a Tarantino film to make me cry. I cried, but most people won't, right? You're 100% right, because most people won't know that history and won't know the horrific shit that happened to her as a pregnant fucking woman. Like, anyway, you don't, like,
it's disgusting,
and it's just,
and that's what really happened, and that's why that ending is
which
so
I guess
sweet if you know.
Exactly. Also adds another layer of like whose responsibility is what, because like, is it the filmmaker's responsibility for the audience to know literal fact? Like, it's not like he's referencing another piece of art that someone might not have seen.
Yeah,
he is literally riffing off real world events.
Yeah.
So maybe then it's more like it is on us as an audience to be educated. I don't know. I mean, it's a complicated question. It's a fucking interesting question. I think so. I mean, in a lot of ways, as sort of like shaggy and slow and not showily referential, this is in a way one of his most interesting films in terms of his references. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's such a strange beast.
Yeah, it's true. I think a lot of the descriptions I've read on websites, or even like at the Sun Theatre here, they for any big film release, as in film projection, they make like a little program that goes with it and stuff, which is really cool. Yeah, I love that. But including that and all these other descriptions, it always says set against the backdrop of the Manson murders.
Interesting.
So I think I do think that they were pushing that from a PR point of view, like just stay in that mindset. And cinema fans know, and probably like
I think that's exactly. There's a general knowledge about Sharon Tate. History. Once you say Sharon Tate's in it, like there's an implication there.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's probably just younger viewers or people that just don't care that are missing out. But again, like, the movie spoke so much to you because it had that stuff in it. And art doesn't have to speak to everyone. So even though Tarantino's name draws in everyone, it's not up to him to please all of them necessarily. He has in the past, because he's just such an entertaining filmmaker. But this time around, I think it was a more personal experience for him.
And I happen to be in that narrow section. Yeah, exactly.
You have similar passions and knowledge.
I guess in a way he always has appealed to a certain... I mean, I guess you're right in terms of his broad appeal. It's true. Like, you know, Hateful Eight, there's very specific, like, you know, Morricone score, like there's certain Western references that certain people will only get. Like, there's a certain cinephile crowd. Yeah. But you're right, this is his most, like... targeted, in a way, passionate project. He clearly...
I think so.
Which is great in a way. And I mean, if we really do only have one more film in him, like, I prefer something more personal than more broad. You know what I mean? Like, hone in on what you're really passionate about, because that's where the best art comes from, I think. I don't know. Anyway.
Man. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other discussion, isn't it? Like, what the fuck is he going to do for his last
seriously.
film?
I do want him to do a sci-fi. I mean, I know he's like poo-pooed this Star Trek thing that the rumors are going around, but like, that'd be fucking cool. I don't want him to do another. I love his westerns, but I don't want him to do another western. He's done too many. I want him to do something new.
No. I think it's interesting you say sci-fi. I think either that or a horror film.
Death Proof dabbles. I feel like in horror.
Yeah,
but it's more like grindhousey. Yeah. I loved it. I fucking love Death Proof. People aren't into it, but I love it too. Yeah, and I was one of the naysayers, right? That at first I preferred the You Rodriguez Are Fucking Dead film, to Me. I have always hated that Rodriguez film.
Because that's the superficial one.
This is a perfect example of Joker versus, like, Robert Rodriguez is all surface. All surface, does not understand anything. And then you watch Tarantino and he understands the genre. Yeah.
Yes.
This is like you could teach a film class. So people just need to watch those two films to, like, understand the difference.
They are, it's true. They make a very good, interesting contrast, right? Planet Terror, whatever. That's what it's called, right?
Planet Terror. I think it's Planet Terror.
That's the one that shows first. That's like your sweets, and then you get this like hearty meal that's got substance.
It's just like loose 70s, like kind of horror-y, kind of shaggy thing that's like practical stunts. It's cool. It's such a cool film.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. But at the time, I was like, well, I thought I was expecting more of that goofy kind of stuff, you know, and I am a bit embarrassed about that as a, you know,
you live and learn,
but I can't. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, anyway, I'd love to see him do like maybe horror is the wrong word, but like something that is pure thriller, or because the way he can create tension is just like masterful. He's up there with the best like thriller horror filmmakers, but he's never applied it fully. It's to
I would agree with that
whole film. So I don't know if it's in whether his like dialogue and editing style in general kind of gels with a whole film worth of tension building, but I don't know. I think that would be interesting. Whatever he does, it's going to be intriguing. And recently I was listening to an interview with him, and he said, like, I'm not going to stop making stuff. I just might do 10 films, and then I might do... He wants to write books, and he's also interested in doing, like, a short form television thing as well. So, you know...
Always wiggling his way out of these fucking 10-film contract, I mean, that's a good thing. I'm not complaining, I suppose. I mean, I guess I'd prefer to see more films than I would books and TV, but... any Tarantino I can get, I guess.
It would be interesting to see what he'd do with a television show.
Didn't he direct an episode of CSI back in the day?
Yeah.
So he's dabbled.
Yeah, he did. He has dabbled, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note...
amazing filmmaker, fascinating guy. Yeah.
All right, maybe we should wrap it up for now. I think that's like a good like recap of some good stuff and a big... chat about Joker. Yeah. I mean, I know we've been off for like 6 months, but I'd love to hear feedback from listeners on any of the things we've talked about. Even just like anything you want us to review in the future. Some feedback, anything would be good.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us at prepostfilmreview@gmail.com. That's the best way.
Yeah, that's probably the best way. We are on Twitter at prepostfr. and on Facebook. But shoot us an email if you want something more specific.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And hopefully we'll be back soon. I think this is a good restart to the pod. I'm not exactly sure what we'll be doing next, but hopefully you'll see more stuff popping up in your feed soon.
For sure. Yeah, we want to do more films, and in between, like these little sort of general chats are really interesting. I think I quite like.
Actually, yeah. I mean, maybe it's a bit of a call out to listeners as well. And if you guys enjoy our more free form chats about stuff that we're doing, perhaps we could do that in between, proper pre-post episodes. That could be fun. But let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Cool.
See ya.
Bye.